what's the problem with magic money? Dollars themselves are magic money. And I mean, I've thought for years and years and years, if they're lying about inflation, if they're lying about unemployment, if they're, everything that we get is a lie, then why would even the amount of debt outstanding be real? Why would money supply be real? I mean, we're lied to on everything. So it happened in London with the amount of gold and silver that's been pulled out of London. Others, it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get your delivery. To me, that's a default. I mean, outright, it's like Wimpy, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. Many people can live a month without going to a grocery store. I mean, it's going back to being a prepper. You need to make sure you have the ability for clean water. You need to make sure you have some ability for electricity. I mean, if you've got freezers, how are they going to run without electricity? You need to make sure that you have, the ability to feed yourself, your family, the people around you for X amount of time until the system comes back up. Because going to the grocery store, going to the restaurant, none of that's going to happen. So you just need to have the mindset that you're going to be on your own.
You're watching Capital Cause, and my name is Danny, and today's guest is fan favorite Bill Holter. Bill, thank you so much for coming back on the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, let's dive right in, Bill. What is most topical for you right now, given the insanity that we're seeing almost every day? There's a hot news item. So I'm going to open the floor to you. Talk about whatever's on your mind right now, Bill. What should be on the radar screen for every gold and silver investor out there?
Yeah, I think, yesterday's news from Elon Musk that there's 14 agencies that basically spew money out that, they're calling it magic money. There's the computers don't talk to each other. Basically, what he's saying is there's really no way to really pinpoint what money supply actually is. So,
which is nuts because GDP and money velocity and all this stuff all rely on money supply. So if money supply is undependable, that throws the entire reporting mechanism that we use to gauge the economy out the window.
Yeah, it throws. What it does is you're not able to actually do math. You can't do the math on the actual amount of money supply. You can't do the velocity. You can't do any number of calculations simply because you don't know that the money supply is real. Now, I posted that article at my website yesterday, and I just made the comment, what's the problem with magic money? Dollars themselves are magic money. And I mean, I've thought for years and years and years, if they're lying about inflation, if they're lying about unemployment, if they're, everything that we get is a lie, then why would even the amount of debt outstanding be real? Why would money supply be real? I mean, we're lied to on everything. So, and this is just another example of being lied to.
Yeah, I actually have the clip here pulled up so we can watch it. So let's see. This is from the Ted Cruz podcast, I believe. So let's see what Musk has to say.
One of the things you told me is what you call magic money computers at the Treasury. So tell us about it, because I never heard of that until you brought that up.
Okay, so you may think that that the government computers all talk to each other. They synchronize. They add up what funds are going somewhere, and it's it's coherent. There's and that the numbers, for example, that you're presented as a senator, are actually the real numbers.
One would think.
They're not.
Yeah.
Okay. They're not totally wrong, but they're probably off by 5% or 10% in some cases. So I call a magic money computer any computer which can just make money out of thin air. That's magic money.
So how does that work?
It just issues payments.
And you said there's something like 11 of these computers at Treasury that are sending out trillions in payments?
They're mostly at Treasury. Some are, but there's some at HHS, there's one or two at State, there's some at DOD. I think we found now 14 magic money computers.
14, okay.
They just send money out of nothing.
Wow. So, I mean, that's just what they found. What they found so far. Is there? It raises into question: is
Right.
there a paper trail behind all this, behind all these payments, or do they just go off the books?
Yeah, who knows? There's no way to know. I mean, my thought process is, what's the difference between these 14 computers and the Federal Reserve? I mean, dollars themselves are magic money. They're not backed by anything. I guess technically they're backed by the U.S. military.
Yeah, but it just gives the
You know,
executive branch direct control of the money supply, in effect.
Right. Yeah, it's a. I'm not surprised, and no one should be surprised. But it's super bad. It's really a bad look, and it's. I guess you could say that it puts a big dent in the rule of law, if you will. You know, because theoretically we're supposed to get real numbers. The United States has always been, you know, the bastion for the world for the rule of law. And I mean, this is just another example that we're full of shit.
And in effect, they're just pulling money out of people's savings account by inflating the dollar that way, right? Because if
they're not pulling dollars out of savings accounts. They're pulling
in effect,
the value of each dollar.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What they're doing is they're making every dollar that you have in your pocket, in your bank account, with an insurance company, with a broker, or whatever. Those dollars are worth less than what we already believe, because we know that there is more money supply than has been stated. And then, Danny, one other thing that I've been keeping an eye on, and I think a lot of people have been watching, has been the movement of gold and silver into the COMEX. Last week alone, there was something like 543 tons of silver in 5 days.
Wow.
Were delivered to COMEX. The question is why? Well, the answer obviously is because the demand is there, and they're scared stiff that they're going to fail to deliver. And I mean, if you look at what's happened in London with the amount of gold and silver that's been pulled out of London, others it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks to get your delivery. To me, that's a default. I mean, outright, you know, it's like Wimpy, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
It is a default on the part of the Bank of England, but you're also seeing it in Switzerland. You're also seeing it across several other parts of the world. Why is the gold and silver flowing to the U.S.?
Because there was in this. I mean, there's no way to prove whether this is correct or not. But I look at it as there was so much rehypothecation, and now there's talk about auditing Fort Knox. Mm-hmm. Those that lent the gold are calling their gold back.
But why now?
Well, obviously, I mean, the obvious why now is because just the talk of an audit of Fort Knox, West Point, the depositories. Not only that, but I mean, everything seems to be coming to a head. You know, the curtain is being pulled back in so many different areas, and the rehypothecation is a sleight of hand. And one other thing on silver, I don't know where it is this week, but I believe last week or end of the previous week, the cost to borrow and sell short SLV shares was 12%, which is astronomical. I mean, you were looking at 2-3% a month and a half, 2 months ago. Now we're at 12. So there's all kinds of things happening behind the scenes. And of course, you're watching price. Gold has clearly gone through $3,000 an ounce today. Mm-hmm. And if you go back to the year 2000, gold was $252. So that is a 12 bagger this century.
If you're looking for great deals on gold and silver coins and bars from a company that you can trust, then you've got to check out the good folks over at Pimbex. This year, I've really gotten to know these guys, and all I can say is you're not going to deal with a better group of people. They're a family-owned gold and silver online bullion company offering the essentials and more at industry-leading prices while always providing first-class top-tier service. That's PIMBEX.com. And if you're looking to convert some or all of your retirement account into real gold and silver, give Pimbex a call. They'll help explain the process and get you started on the right path. Your support at Pimbex also helps support the channel. So reach out to Pimbex today. You won't be disappointed. And make sure to tell them Danny sent you. That's
with no risk.
Exactly, at no risk. And if you own it outright through the physical, there is no counterparty risk. It's right there.
Correct. Exactly.
So, and you mentioned SLV, PSLV, also some interesting developments happening on the PSLV front, which is the Sprott Physical Silver Trust. You're seeing this epic record volume of short positioning on PSLV. Now, you may ask yourself, well, why is that important? Well, the difference between SLV, which is the JP Morgan backed ETF, and PSLV, which is the Sprott-backed ETF, is that the JP Morgan ETF partakes in this rehypothecation process where there is multiple claims to the same unit of silver. PSLV, on the other hand, it's not. It's a one-to-one mapping between each shareholder and each unit of silver. So why would someone want to bring down PSLV's share price and not SLV's share price? Well, when PSLV goes up, what does PSLV have to do? They have to go into the spot market and find that silver somewhere. And what happens when they buy that silver from the spot market? Price goes up.
Right.
So
yeah, if you think about GLD and SLV, they were originally created as a pressure valve, a pressure relief valve. In other words, it directs money away from actual metal and into basically contracts. And the games that they've played for all these years has hurt sentiment. But now with PSLV, that's there's a function that has to take place. And like you said, that function is if the price goes higher, then yeah, they're gonna if not the price, but if the amount of shares outstanding goes higher, they've got to go out and they have to buy metal. So what they're doing is they're trying to prevent PSLV from actually needing to make the purchase. So they've kind of jumped from what always was sentiment to now the mechanics.
Yeah. And then speaking broadly from an economic standpoint, you've had these kind of dog whistles, let's call them, if you want to call them that, from Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, as well as Trump, saying that effectively we are heading towards a recession. Scott Bessent, he used some spicy words the other day, and he said that we are heading towards a much-needed financial crisis. So if they're telling us it's that bad, how bad is it actually, Bill?
Probably a lot worse. And I mean, I was on the record from the very first day they started talking about the Doge cut. That's money that's not going to make it into the system. So, and the system being a Ponzi scheme, if you cut off new money, how do you continue the Ponzi scheme? They absolutely know that a financial crisis / I'm going to use the word depression is in our future.
And how close are we to this depression? Is it a purely demand-driven depression, or should we also expect to see rising prices from the commodity side, i.e. the supply side? Because gold is going up. Gold was a harbinger of the last supply-side inflationary cycle. Should we expect to see kind of like the stagflationary episode where we see demand-side deflation and supply-side inflation? Or no, are you expecting a wide swath depression?
That's a good question. I would just caution you not to lump gold in as a commodity. Gold is money. It's traded on the exchange as a commodity, but it is money. And if you go back literally, hundreds and hundreds of years, whenever it looks like we're headed into a bear market or bad times, the best thing to have always done is go to cash. And back in the old days, cash was gold. Cash was silver. Today, cash is trash. It's fiat currency first off. And if you're looking at a money market, it's short-term debt. If you're looking at bank deposits, that goes against loans. I mean, cash is not what it once was. So I think that's what you're seeing, especially in gold. This tractor in first gear move that we've seen over the last, quite a few months now, of going straight up, no huge spikes, not really huge volatility, but just a first gear grind. That is a function of big money. When I say big money, I'm including central banks all over the world, knowing what we're talking about right now, that they need to go to cash. They need to support and strengthen their balance sheets. The only way to do that is to put real money that cannot default, and that's gold. So, and to answer your stagflation question, yeah, I think there's no question we're going to have stagflation. You could look at commercial real estate is already imploded. If you're in Washington, D.C., and you own a home, is it recession or is it already depression? Nobody can sell anything. That's all of this is because everything is financialized. It's a morph into the financial system and create a crisis. Now, in a crisis, the dollar itself is not going to strengthen. It might strengthen versus the pound or the euro or the yen, the USDX, but that's measuring crap versus crap. When you measure fiat currencies versus real money, gold, that tells you they are devaluing like crazy. Inflation, there's no question we're going to have inflation. At the same time, we have deflation of assets. It's what I've said for 15 years now, that we would have inflation of the things you need and deflation of the things you already have.
Right. And how much of this stuff could we attribute to exogenous events, namely the war setting that we've been seeing kind of engulf the world over the last few years now, but especially it seems to have accelerated the last couple of weeks on the European front. Luckily, Donald Trump's been able to get America out of that war, but it seems to still be on as it relates to Europe and Russia. So there is a bit of war fever setting into Europe. Could that be another reason why the gold is fleeing Europe and into America? And then just yesterday, we did see these tensions rise in the Middle East. The defense, the military struck these various Yemeni Houthi targets over some of the attacks they've been doing over the Red Sea, and they said that any further attacks from the Houthis would be attributable to Iran. Iran doesn't seem to be backing down. This thing looks like it could spiral out of control fairly quick, especially if Iran shuts off the Straits of Hormuz. Oil spikes up to 100 some odd dollars. And then, then you're really off to the races. How much of this gold breaking $3,000, oil still, in the high $60 range, how much of this could be attributable to all of this war fever going on around the world?
Yeah, first off, I don't think the stance of war is an exogenous event. If you think about it, it's so much easier to wage war with a monetary system the way we have today, where they can just borrow or print the money. If you go back 100 years ago, 200 years ago, in order to wage war, you had to have some gold. You had to have money. You couldn't borrow. You couldn't borrow your way through. And what's going on in the bombing of the Houthis, It's my opinion that the war hawks want to attack Iran, and I mean I'm including Israel being a war hawk, and I mean all you have to do is look at Trump's stance on Israel. He's already written a executive order about anti-Semitism. If you say anything bad about Israel, people are getting kicked out of school. You can go to jail. And I mean, that basically just destroys the First Amendment. So it's my opinion that these strikes on Yemen and making the statement that if anything else is done from them, it'll be viewed as coming from Iran. I personally believe they want to attack Iran. And obviously Israel would love that.
It does appear like they're setting the stage, so to speak. If you recall back in World War II, they went after the Japanese as well as the Italians, and I'm sure German Americans as well. But the Japanese are the most prolific in terms of the internment camps there. But before you can go into a war, you've got to make sure the dissidents are all tamed, are all kind of corralled before you set off the war, because you don't want people going around protesting, and whether you agree with these people or not, that's besides the point. It's a First Amendment issue, but during times of war, the First Amendment goes out the window.
Absolutely. And it's been that way. Well, and what's the saying about war? The first casualty is truth.
Yep. Yeah, so it's not looking good out there for the war doves. And you're seeing gold go up even higher. Oil's catching a bit from this. We'll see if this proliferates even further down the line, but it's not looking good. What do you make of the energy market? Go ahead.
Danny, speaking of the first casualty of war is truth. I mean, think about going all the way back to the Korean War. I mean, every military, everything that we've done militarily since the 1950s, 1960s. There's obviously been protesters. The First Amendment is always disdained by those in power, because those in power, they're doing the Vietnam War, they're doing the Korean War, they're building a military base here, a military strike there. The First Amendment, it gets trampled on with any type of military activity.
And I mean, this is dangerous because it starts off with a group that may not be connected to you, right? I.e. visa holders, even green card holders. I mean, you and I were both citizens. So it's like, and from our perspective, why do we care? We're citizens. But who's to say that it can't proliferate down the line down to citizens someday as well?
Right. First they came for.
Mm-hmm.
It's that story. First they came for someone and nobody cared. Then they came for someone else, nobody cared. Then they came for me and there was nobody else left to care.
Right. So, I mean, we'll see what happens here. It's very troubling times. What do you make of these talks between the U.S. and Canada? Canada just elected Mark Carney, who's this big World Economic Forum guy. Much worse than Trudeau, from what I've heard. He's former Bank of Canada, former Bank of England. Seems to be deeply embedded into the Davos crowd. And now he's going around meeting with the EU.
Former Goldman Sachs, I believe.
Oh, yeah, former Goldman Sachs. And then he's going around meeting with the EU about EU membership with Canada, for Canada, I should say. And he's very adversarial to Trump. It seems he's on the polar opposite of he's on Trump's shit list, let's call it. Trump Trump has said multiple times that he wants Canada to be the 51st state. There appears to be this rift between Europe and America. Could he be on the European side trying to get Canada in the pockets of Europe before Trump can get Canada aligned with America. Is that a potential kind of rift you see there?
Absolutely. I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, think about elementary school. You know, if you're on your own and the big bully's going to beat, is looking to beat you up, what do? You join up with the rest of the crew. Now he's got to beat up everybody because you're one of them. And I mean, that's what that's in my mind, that's exactly what they're doing, trying to align with Europe. They're trying to get some type of strength or power behind them.
And the unity kind of makes sense because Europe doesn't have the natural resource prowess that Canada does. Canada kind of fixes their collateral problem. Of course, they have Norway, but Norway's it's not enough. But the big problem with Europe was always that they had no natural resources to extract from. Canada fixes that problem. So it seems like a hand in glove type of scenario. But now all of a sudden you potentially have I don't want to call it an enemy state on the border between the U.S. and Canada. Because, I mean, look, from the perspective of Canadians, we're now an enemy state from as it relates to them because we've been provoked, or Trump's been provoking them in the last couple of months. But it's not good to have enemy states aligned on the border. It kind of makes more sense for them to be more aligned, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and understand, and I'm just going to use the term tariff broadly, because of the tariffs with Canada and tariffs all over the world. Understand that tariffs, what they do, they slow trade down. They don't stop trade, but they slow it down, which means there's less cash flow generated from the real economy. The danger is that the tariffs / the angry dealing, if you will, spills over to the financial markets. Financial markets are so leveraged at this point that, you could pick almost any, and they don't even have to be big. You could pick almost any type of real economy event that could easily spill over to the financial markets. And the financial markets, because they've been walking a tightrope of too much debt. And now if you throw tariffs in, that slows the cash flow down. You add Doge into it, that obviously slows the cash flow down. And what happens is the Ponzi scheme no longer has new money coming into it. So the danger is that the real world affects the financial world, and the financial world just completely blows up. And when that happens, then the real world stops, because everything runs on credit. There's nothing that you will do, touch, use, see today that doesn't have credit involved, except looking at your lawn growing or trees growing. Everything that you do, credit has already been involved in it to get it to that point in space, in time.
Yeah, it's the lifeblood of the economy, essentially.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I've talked about this for years and years, and many people are like, you don't know what you're talking about. I promise you, even on something simple, and I've used a loaf of bread as an example. On a loaf of bread, there's at least a dozen uses of credit from the farmer, from the field to the grocery store. And then you probably have one more use of credit, because a lot of people buy food on their credit card. So if credit starts to seize up, or actually does seize up, the real economy will outright stop, and life as you knew it will be completely different the next day.
How likely is that to happen, though? Is that like a 5 standard deviation or event or something like that? Like, how is it an inevitability, or is it something that's
what it is?
Yeah,
I believe it to be an inevitability, because the math to sovereign debt, the math to corporate debt, the math even to individual debt in many cases is untenable. It doesn't work. So eventually this will happen. It's not a question of if, but when. And it's just looking like things are heating up at this point, and the when looks to be pretty close.
Interesting. And when that does happen, the entire economy becomes kind of lifeless. If the lifeblood is no longer there, the economy by definition becomes lifeless. Now your supply chains break down, frozen.
Right.
And so
Yep,
how does
exactly.
how does one prepare for such an event?
Well, I was going to say, that's why you need to prepare. You need to make sure that you can make it. I mean, I would say at least 6 months. You know, if the financial markets seize up, do they seize up for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months? You know, God forbid, more than 6 months. I mean, how many people could live? How many people can live a month without going to a grocery store? I mean, it's going back to being a prepper. You need to make sure you have the ability for clean water. You need to make sure you have some ability for electricity. I mean, if you've got freezers, how are they going to run without electricity? You need to make sure that you have, you know, the ability to feed yourself, your family, the people around you for X amount of time until the system comes back up. Because going to the grocery store, going to the restaurant, none of that's going to happen. So you just need to have the mindset that you're going to be on your own for, you know, like I said, use a number of 6 months. I mean, more than 6 months is going to be, it'll be a giant kill off, if you will, because we're no longer farmers.
I believe 6 months is the magic number. Yeah, 6 months is the magic number. There was a study conducted on this where they found that after 6 months, humanity tends to adapt to the new situation. So it typically takes about 6 months for a new environment to really play out in terms of adaptability. So after 6 months, people will begin to adapt to the new scenario, and then they'll be able to kind of live.
But how do you adapt? Yeah. How does society, the way it's structured now, how does society adapt to no foodstuffs, no goods reaching a market? Now, if you go back to the
you're probably gonna have to shed a lot of the excess, i.e., there's probably gonna be a die-off.
Right. And that's my point. The world today is so different than it was in 1930. 100 years ago, 85% of people out there knew how to farm in some form, you know, some way, shape, or form. And I would doubt that there's even 10% of the population today that can farm. So, I mean, they had some means of sustenance. Even if they had no income, they had nothing, they were able to hunt, fish, farm. Those skills, people don't have them today.
Very true, because back then, people could be viewed as an asset. I.e., if you're a farmer and you know how to farm, you're effectively an asset. But nowadays, most people could be viewed as a liability. So the more being around a bunch of people, the more people that are around you, the greater the liability. Because now, not only do they not know how to farm, take care of themselves, they're going to go bonkers and crazy. And if they find out that you know how to farm,
they want your stuff.
Yeah.
So not only are they just a liability, not only are they just a liability, they're also, I mean, if you're living in a highly populated area, you got to view pretty much everyone around you as an enemy. If you have stuff, they're going to want it, and they're going to take it.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's why we have you on here, Bill, to kind of shed the true reality on us. But I think that's pretty much all I had on the docket. Oh, one more thing, actually. What do you make of this realignment, so to speak, of the Western Hemisphere that Trump's been undergoing? He does seem to have a greater focus on getting Greenland, getting Canada, for lack of a better term, going to war over the Panama Canal. Again, this kind of seems like a precursor towards a bigger war. I.e., you want to, if you're anticipating yeah, if you're anticipating a big war with China or whoever coming down the pike, you'd obviously want to. I mean, it's in a macro sense, it's the U.S. prepping for war by getting all of its ducks in orders in the Western Hemisphere, is it not?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, if you look at, the term reset has been used for close to 20 years. And actually, I think the first one to talk about a reset was my previous partner, Jim Sinclair. When you talk about a reset, it's also going to reset, if you want to call it geographically, where you've got Europe, you've got Africa, you've got North America, Central America, and maybe parts of South America. You've got Asia, you've got Asia and China and Russia. When the financial system does break, what's going to reemerge will be probably 6 or 7 territories, if you will, competing economic blocks. So I think that's what Trump is trying to do, is trying to fortify the North American economic bloc before this happens.
Yeah, you've been hearing this term sphere of influence go around lately.
Exactly.
Not just, yeah. So
Right.
there's this talk of various spheres of influence. So we're heading away from a unipolar world, which is the U.S. just calling the shots to the entire globe. And now you have these spheres of influence. I believe I've heard Rubio say this. I've also heard it being said from the Russian side of things as well. And basically, it means that, again, yes, America's sphere of influence, where it has hegemony, will effectively be probably North and Central America, maybe even South America as well. And then you have the Russians, who will probably have their sphere of influence in Europe. China will have their sphere of influence in East Asia. And you have India with their sphere of influence in Southeast Asia. And in the Middle East, of course, you've got Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel. So it appears that's where we're heading, is where you're going to have these.
And you just mentioned mentioned the Middle East. Understand that the Middle East is not leaning toward or turning toward the United States. The Middle East broadly, including Saudi Arabia, because they're entering the BRICS. All these countries that are joining the BRICS, that's turning their back on the United States. And I mean, Trump can bluster all he wants about, if you don't do business with us, or if you tariff off us, we're going to tariff you 100%, 200%. Ultimately, when this goes down, when the world fractures, the United States, because we were, I don't like to swear on your thing, but because we were assholes to the world for so long, they're not going to turn toward us. They're going to turn against us. And the U.S. is in the process, in my opinion, we're in the process of isolating ourselves at a time when we don't manufacture anything.
Yeah, I'm sure all these countries have their receipts ready for when the time comes when they can cash them in.
Right. Yep.
So interesting. Anything else you want to talk about? That's all I have on my end. Anything else you want to bring up or talk about, Bill, that we didn't get to?
I mean, there's so much just on a daily basis. We could probably do this every 2 days and not lack for topics. I mean, if you think about it, prior to let's use prior to the cell phone, prior to the internet. I mean, it would take 10 years for something to happen and fully be completed. I mean,
right.
Now it takes a week. Everything is just going so fast. And you could take a vacation for a month and come back from it, turn a computer on and go, what happened? It's not even the same world. And that's what's going to happen when markets seize up, when credit seizes up. That's what will happen on a complete scale to everything within a 72-hour period of time.
I feel the same way whenever I take like a 24-hour. I mean, there's very seldom days where I'm even off my phone now. But if I take like a nap and I wake up 2 hours later, it's like, oh wow, what just happened? In the world. So things are definitely moving at rapid speed. I've coined the term information velocity. The information, much like we have money velocity,
Yep.
right? The information velocity, the turnover rate of information has just increased and increased. And with that comes progression. Things progress a lot faster. So we're seeing that happen now, and
Right.
it's only going to get faster as time moves on. So unless there's a big CME, and what is it called? A sun. It's like a big
An
coronal mass
EMP?
ejection. Coronal mass ejection. Yes, it's when the sun
Yeah, or
shoots
an
off
EMP
like
or whatever. Sure.
yeah. Unless
Sure.
there's a CME from the sun or something that just completely wipes out the grid, and then we're back to caveman days. I don't anticipate it slowing down anytime soon. But Bill, this has been a fascinating interview as always. Tell us where we can hear and see more of you for those that are interested.
Sure. You can go to my website. It's just billholter.com. I do work as a precious metals broker. If you want to contact me directly, you can go to my business email. It's bholter@proton.me.
Awesome. Well, guys, if you enjoyed this broadcast, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Comment "Go Bill Go" in the comment section if you agreed with Bill's take. If you disagreed with any of our takes, do let me know. I do read the comments. Also, check us out on Substack at capitalcosm.substack.com for early access, ad-free versions, and uncensored versions of all of my videos for those that warrant it. And finally, check out our good partners over at Pimbex, PIMBEX.com for all of your gold and silver needs. All right, guys, I'll catch you in the next episode. Bill, thank you for coming on. And guys, thank you for watching. See ya.
Thank you.